Soaring food prices, skyrocketing housing bills. I read that the average price of a new car has hit 50 grand. Today we're going to discuss, are we headed for a recession? It's one of the most common questions I get these days as an economist. You can see that it's on a lot of people's lips at the moment. Here is my answer to this question. Wait. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you, why do I say that? So what is a recession? Recession, technically, 2 quarters or more of negative growth in the economy. Okay, now let's put that to one side and think about what people are actually going through. That's what people are actually going through. It's falling real incomes. Okay, and this has been going on for a while now, more than 2 quarters. That's at the median. So what we have in the economy is a picture of falling real incomes. Why is that? Because prices are skyrocketing, but incomes are not rising nearly enough to keep pace. Okay, so if there's one big fact about our economies, and especially the American economy, it's that incomes have been stagnant for a very, very, very long time. By some standards, since the 1970s. So it's half a century of income stagnation, and all of a sudden, along comes, over the last couple of years, this huge, huge historic blast of mega inflation. So real incomes shrink. Okay? That's what's been happening for the last couple of years. So by that measure, it's almost in one sense irrelevant to ask in a bigger, in a kind of super technical way, is the economy in a recession? This is already telling us is that for most people, they're experiencing a recession. Their personal economy is contracting. That's what real incomes falling mean, right? So if we're just going to be like super nerds and say, hey, is the economy shrinking or not? That's almost a meaningless question at this point. So how can it be? So let's think about this a little bit more. How can it be that the economy is still nominally growing, right? It's not in a recession yet, so that means it's still growing. But most people are seeing falling incomes. It doesn't compute, right? Something has to kind of be off. How can this bigger thing called the economy be growing, but most people are seeing shrinking incomes? Well, the answer to that question tells us something very, very important about the economy. The only way that this can really happen is if those at the very, very top of an economy are taking home all that growth, while everybody else's share of the pie is beginning to shrink. Does that make sense? So think about it. If the whole economy as a whole is growing, but for most people it's actually shrinking, that means a very small number of people have to be capturing all that growth and then some from everybody else whose share is shrinking, right? So that's kind of just basic math, right? So this is a phenomenon that has affected more and more economies over the globe over the last, decade or two. And I've begun to call this phenomenon in my head and in some of my writing, phantom growth. Okay, so phantom growth is exactly this situation where an economy is growing nominally, but for most people, actually, it's not. Their share of the economy is flat or shrinking. And the only way that phantom growth really happens is through exactly the mechanism we just discussed. A very small number of people at the top, let's say 1%, 10%, something like that, are capturing all the gains of that growth, and then some from everybody else, that 80 or 90 or even 99% whose share of the economy is slowly beginning to shrink. Their pie is getting small, their slice of the pie is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So that's phantom growth. And I call it phantom growth because it's not the real thing, right? Growth should mean that, like, maybe not everybody is getting a, proportionally bigger slice of the pie, but it should mean that more than half a society, more than the median, is seeing some kind of growth, right? Is seeing their share of the pie expand. Phantom growth is when just a small percentage of a society sees their incomes expand while everybody else's shrinks. So they can create the illusion of growth if we just look at that one number. Is the economy growing or not over X quarters or not? It can create the illusion of growth. but not the real thing. So it's kind of like a phantom. And if we don't delve deeper into those numbers and we just look at that one top line figure of growth, we'll never see the bigger picture, which is that most people are not seeing those gains. And that's exactly where things stand right now. So if you ask the average person, hey, how do you feel about the economy? People are incredibly pessimistic. They're more pessimistic than they've been in a very, very long time. 80% of people are pessimistic about the economy. 80% of people don't think that life is going to get better for their kids. So both in the short term and in the long term, people are very, very pessimistic about the economy. Okay, and that reflects their real world experience of phantom growth, which is that economists, politicians, and columnists, and all these guys who take their cues from that one number, that big growth number, keep telling them, hey, what are you so worried about? The economy's growing. And in response, a lot of people say to them, what do you mean? What am I worried about? I can't pay the bills. The food prices are skyrocketing. You know, my mortgage is off the charts and interest rates keep going up. Phantom growth. We're going to discuss, not in this video, because this is already getting too long, but in future videos, how phantom growth is kind of at the heart of a larger set of failures. The failures of globalization, the larger failure of the economy, the way that it is, the global economy, the way that it was designed to really deliver stable and rising levels of prosperity, especially to middle classes. And so how that hollowed out the center and had all kinds of corrosive effects later on downstream. So we're going to discuss a lot of that. So that's why I said, you know, my answer to the question, is there going to be a recession, is wait. So now you know, right? I gave you like this long, complicated answer, but I wanted you to really understand and kind of be literate with this. I think everybody should be literate with this, that there can be a situation where the economy is growing, the average person's share is not. And when the average person's share is shrinking, and, you know, if that's true to like the 70th, 80th, 90th percentile, if that's true, but the economy's not in a recession, you know, that term almost becomes meaningless, right? If 90% of people's incomes are shrinking, but the economy is still growing, all we really know is that 10% of people are capturing all that growth plus more from the 90% whose incomes are shrinking. This is phantom growth. So that's a long way of answering the question. So now let me come to the much shorter answer. Are we headed for a recession in that very strict sense? Well, you know the real answer now, which is that there already is a recession for most people. And from there, we can probably say that that will grow, right? It's unlikely that if most people are experiencing a recession, suddenly they're going to be able to magic up the money to stop the larger economy from falling into that more technical and strict definition of a recession, 2 or more quarters. So that's kind of the answer. So I wanted you just to be literate and aware of this set of facts, that phantom growth is really at the heart of what's kind of creating all these problems in our economies, and is really almost warping our vision and leaving us unable to see it clearly. All right, so I know that's a long, complicated answer, but I hope it helps and I hope it makes sense. We'll talk more about it. If you have questions, leave them below. I'll try to answer them. Thank you for listening. Bye.